Hi, and welcome to this presentation about collaborative practice research. I am Charlotte Hojholt from Roskilde University in Denmark, and I will switch to PowerPoints in the hope that it will be more easy to follow with the PowerPoints. Qualitative research seems to be widespread used and acknowledged, but at the same time, it nevertheless struggles with scientific arguments and clarifications about what kinds of knowledge it creates. This emerges as a paradox and raises questions about qualitative psychology's internal challenges, dilemmas, and contradictions. Despite the turn towards everyday life, the move from laboratory research to exploration in ordinary social situations, and the rejection of artificial divisions between objective research practice and subjective use of knowledge, I find that we still struggle with these issues and with contradictions in our scientific practice. Although they are well discussed, concrete accounts of qualitative research are burdened by artificial divisions between theory and practice, between them and us, between everyday practice and knowledge. Such divisions and othering, as well as the mystique of the research processes they maintain, are central to what I want to discuss. To innovate in qualitative research, conceptualizations are needed that move the research from being about other kinds of people to being with and from subjects involved in the research issues and topics. The othering of groups of people, along with the resulting hierarchical notions of knowledge and divisions between those who have knowledge, create knowledge, and those who are simply involved, simultaneously appears to be part of the problems of inequality in the context of children and difficulties in school life. I therefore discuss the methodological problems involved in exploring situated inequality as an example of methodological challenges and of how qualitative psychology can shed light on what a problem is connected with in everyday social practice. Hence, in this presentation, I will alternate between methodological discussions and examples from our research, between challenges in inequality research and more generally in qualitative research. This will involve discussing three issues. The first is the anchoring of qualitative psychology in everyday life, also conceptualized by Dreier and Lave, among others, as a decentring of our research. Second, the question of how we view the object of research. Rather than objectifying other people or groups of people, I will argue for formulation of researching with and from those involved and about common problematics in social life. Finally, as the third issue, I will emphasize the challenges of how we can organize collaborative research to go beyond artificial divisions. First, however, I must seek to concretize and illustrate how scientific theoretical contradictions seem to lead to dilemmas for qualitative research. When working with young researchers in particular, I find that they encounter contradictory criteria when asserting that what they do is science, and abstract criteria in terms of distance and alienation in the research process, prohibiting involvement and suspicion regarding experiences with research questions. These are challenges that have been articulated by pointing to the illusion of creating knowledge from a point of nowhere. But although it seems a familiar point that knowledge, theory, and concepts cannot be developed beyond social practice, criteria from more abstract thinking still seem to haunt exchanges about qualitative research practice. How can collaborating about research become awkward? To address this question, I draw attention to the language and concepts surrounding fieldwork. DeWalt and DeWalt's classic book on participant observations provides an in-depth discussion on developing exchanges on participant observations, but it also illustrates how language almost traps us in understandings that we wish to break free of. How to participate as an observer, for example, is discussed in relation to a continuum between the abstract idea of not engaging, not affecting the material, nearly not being present, versus full participation where the researcher is almost at one with those being observed. DeWalt and DeWalt also write about methodological discussions in relation to not revealing research interests and research questions, and sometimes not even that one is a researcher. Some researchers act as lurkers without revealing that they are researchers. Others, however, have lurked more openly. This relevant observation about fieldwork again becomes caught up in a continuum of openness rather than clarifying how we collaborate and navigate based on what we explore, where, and with whom. Finally, I want to mention the desubjectification of formulations like the people being studied, the other, and many references to the researcher as an instrument of data collection. This is language that rather directly implies othering of co-researchers and that the researcher should not act as a subject. Hopefully, these insights help shed light on the contradictions and dilemmas we may experience during participants' observations. I will argue for collaboration, transparency, and for explicitly involving the so-called research subjects in being curious with us as co-researchers. However, methodological issues must chiefly be seen in light of the types of knowledge that specific research seeks to generate and based on which problematics. Research on inequality illustrates these dilemmas, and I will discuss this research in regard to pointing out both the methodological challenges and the opportunities that qualitative research has in terms of contributing to understanding situated inequality in everyday school life. Inequality is in our field typically understood through statistical studies based on the idea of intergenerational transmission of social problems. Of note, these studies simultaneously highlight that contrasting evidence is presented, and it is recognized that unmeasured sociological or psychological factors may be important. Bird argues that agency should be an integral aspect of research, but statistical models present this aspect as an independent variable frozen in a mechanistic conceptualization of transfer of risk, impact, effect, and particular individuals. Thus, we are offered concepts that are supposed to reveal connections in everyday life, but that appear distant from people's lives, interactions, and participation, not to mention their ways of seeing meanings and possibilities. McDermott and Mosoki point out that making divisions into isolated variables and mechanisms obscures the complexity of living everyday life, as well as people as acting and meaning-making subjects. Most importantly, however, their point on transcending the we-they thinking in inequality studies is useful in addressing methodological issues. This type of problematization calls for the inclusion of social interaction processes and agency in qualitative research, not as factors, but as opportunities to analyze contextual connections in social and historical practice. Qualitative research has the opportunity to explore everyday life of school as social practice, interaction between many parties, and cooperation and conflicts about what school should be. School is at once a historical social institution and the context of many people's lives. Exploring school as a social practice and conceptualizing subjective agency as concretely linked to social conditions and not as something outside, as yet another isolated factor, is a methodological challenge. Rather than taking an isolated look at the lack of life management skills or problematic behavior, attention must be given to what needs to be managed in different people's different lives. Hence, to go beyond abstraction of the isolation of inequality issues, conceptual options are required to explore and analyze the contradictions and conflicts of everyday life, and how people manage these together. The term conduct of everyday life was developed to conceptualize the links between social life conditions and personal ways of dealing with them in everyday life. The term provides an analytical possibility for focusing on everyday actions and coordinations, as well as on how subjects maneuver in relation to varying demands and personal pursuits. Everyday life does not happen by itself. Routines and ordinary tasks also must be dealt with and considered, just as they are sometimes the source of conflicts. Furthermore, life is lived across contexts and pursue various personal concerns. Children, for example, need to wiggle and twist their attention in relation to conflicting demands of school and their preoccupation with belonging to peer groups and coordinating with each other to explore and grasp the opportunities of everyday life. Learning and teaching in school takes place in a social life with lots of social dynamics at play simultaneously. In this slide, inequality can be seen as linked to conditions for maneuvering with others in relation to the dilemmas, contradictions, social coordinations, and conflicts of everyday life. In our exploration of school life, we see a plurality of situations where children manage to reconcile their preoccupation with their shared interactions and engagement, for example, in football, with, for instance, simultaneously doing their math problems. We also see how various concerns collide and create conflicts between children and between them and their teachers. Both of these aspects are at play in the following observation, where a few boys are working together. Some of them navigate between the schoolwork and talking, one of them apparently without the same access to their collaborative work. I include this example to illustrate qualitative material from everyday life, and because it allows analysis of how children's conflicts are linked to the school's contradictory practices and conflicts concerning the children. And sorry for a horrible PowerPoint. During math class, pupils in the fourth form must work together to solve equations. One group comprises Thomas, Mikkel, Rasmus, and Joachim. Rasmus is quick to complete the math problems on the first page. He waits until Mikkel and Joachim have also reached page 2. Thomas does not do anything, just quietly states, "I can't figure it out." But none of the others seem to relate. They chat about different things, including football and schoolwork. Thomas tries to make contact again, softly stating that it is too difficult. Mikkel hears. He looks at the page and comments, "It's easy." The boys continue to talk about football, peers, and math problems. They help each other with the problems and come up with ideas to solve them. Thomas does not participate in the boys' conversations about schoolwork, but when football is discussed, he tries to contribute, sometimes a little loudly. Thomas calls the teacher, but she's busy as many students are trying to get her attention. He starts making loud noises and the teacher asks him to turn down the volume. As Thomas becomes more and more disconnected from the schoolwork, he becomes similarly disconnected from the conversation taking place among the boys that mingles academic and social topics. Thomas gradually seems quite resigned and starts to make more noise. He gets up to go turn off the light, which leads to shouts from classmates and reprimands from the teacher. The teacher approaches Thomas to explain the task, pointing out that Thomas needs to concentrate on the task and not talk about football. Difficulties and conflicts abound in Thomas' classroom, where the exchanges that took place about the problems appeared to be related to what was regarded as a socio-economically disadvantaged background of some of the pupils, including Thomas. Disagreements arose between teachers and pupils, and between the children concerning, for instance, how social life in the classroom should be regulated. Regulation became both a strategy in relation to the problems and a stressful point of conflict among the children. The pupils' teachers described being pressured by parents, management, and each other. Realizing the connection between these disagreements, pressures, and feelings of powerlessness is essential to understanding the problems in their context. How the collaboration proceeds and how different understandings of difficult situations become individually categorized and displaced to other contexts, such as family background, appear crucial to these processes and to understanding unequal conditions. When doing research from the perspectives of children, we realize how having access to communities and to collaborative maneuvering in the many activities in school appear to be an essential social resource for reconciling conflicting demands and dealing with the contradictions of school life. Children experience unequal conditions in this regard. 3 of the boys in the example organized participation in their social life and schoolwork, which Thomas is unable to gain access to, and he seems to give up. Conflicts involving regulation of school life and how to understand the problematics seem to constitute conflictual conditions in Thomas' personal conduct of everyday life. Methodologically, the example indicates the importance of a research project's design and raises questions like, what can be analyzed and understood as being related? And how can researchers gain access to processes, interactions, and perspectives important to understanding a concrete situation? Our analysis indicates that the primary answer is collaboration, as cooperating with those involved provides access to the reasons for doing what they do, allowing us to gain insight into the conflicts. The processes surrounding children like Thomas are related to many people's conflictual cooperation and powerlessness in relation to what they want to achieve. And the personal agency that was called for in the research on intergenerational transmission must be seen as linked to participation in conflictual processes and to concrete conditions for taking part in these. With the example, I hope to illustrate the importance of interviewing about and observing the social practice of everyday life, social dynamics in learning communities, the reasons of the involved, etc. This implies both focusing on a problem and focusing flexible. And this is what I want to touch on in the last part. How to gain knowledge about such connections. How to collaborate and participate as researchers to create knowledge about connections in everyday social life. Ingold emphasizes how conceptual divisions between being in the world and knowing about it stems from scientific criteria that continues to mystify and confuse researchers, especially in research collaboration and in relation to how researchers experience the research position and resulting in a conceptual gap that leaves us strangers to ourselves. Methodologically, this alienation comes to the surface when researchers share dilemmas and their thoughts on ways of taking part, involvement, and research positions, as well as concerns about how the observed experience the research and that the research may bother them. Often issues like this can be addressed by asking co-researchers about their perspectives and experiences. Dealing with these kinds of dilemmas is linked to transcending the dichotomy of us and them in fieldwork. Psychology is problem-focused, but researchers must interview about and move around the context of the problems. In our examples, among other things, the other children's ordinary ways of managing school life, social dynamics in school communities, the adult conflicts about the class, etc. To focus on the issue in its contextual connections, we need to focus flexibly and to decentralize our attention. Focusing is thus simultaneously selective and contextual, providing a duality that guides researcher participation and ways of navigating in the fieldwork. Consequently, allowing us to focus on relevant connections to problems when exploring them from the perspective of and with the involved subjects. Contextualization connects problems with what they are related to. In our example, we identified how inequality can be related to conflicts, processes of mutual resignation, and displacement of problems. The collaborative perspective provides an opportunity to develop multifaceted and practice-based knowledge from the perspective of those dealing with the research issues in everyday life. The collaborative approach that developed in the practice research tradition is fundamentally about seeing people as exploring subjects who, through their conduct or everyday life, are already investigating the issues that are the focus of the research. Our research projects have typically involved organizing a research community to exchange ideas about a project's design, questions, and development, the perspectives of the involved, as well as present examples in order to jointly discuss the analysis. This provides an opportunity to gain access to the many perspectives, personal reasons, and significant conditions in the field, and to exchange understanding of contextual connections with those who both know about them and may discover something relevant to them in relation to developing their practice. This opportunity also arises due to how we interview, observe, and participate in practice in an open instead of mysterious and closed way, which allow us to invite co-researchers to be curious and set the stage for a shared sense of wonder and inquiry. Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you in the roundtable discussion.